Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today. This webinar is about getting workers' compensation claimants back to work. And I hope every one of you right now is envisioning the doc doing something crazy, going about 87 miles an hour, if I remember right. So, two things we're going to talk about today is light-duty job offers and vocational rehabilitation. We're going to start off with the written job offers. When are they necessary? Well, the Ohio Administrative Code 4121.332 provides a job offer is defined as an offer made in good faith of suitable employment within a reasonable proximity of the injured worker's residence. Within a reasonable proximity can mean different things to different people. I've seen it, as short as across the street. I've seen it probably as far away as about 50 to 60 miles. You start to get much more than that, and claimants are going to argue that it's too far. You go to hearing, and then you're at the discretion of the hearing officer. So you try to get things as close to their home as possible. If it's no further away than it used to be to travel to your plant, that's even better. Then they can't argue anything. So just keep in mind, reasonable proximity can mean different things, but try to be reasonable. If a claimant refuses an oral job offer and the employer intends to initiate proceedings to terminate TT, the employer must give the claimant a written job offer at least 48 hours prior to initiating proceedings. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit in a couple of slides, because a lot of employers think job offers have to all be in writing. That's not the case, although as a best practice, written job offers should be in writing. But as you'll see coming up, the law distinguishes between an initial period of temporary total compensation and when an employer is trying to terminate temporary total compensation. And those are two different things. Well, what are the requirements of a written job offer? Well, the written job offer it has to identify the position being offered, and it absolutely has to include a very detailed description of the job duties that will be required in the position and clearly specify the demands of the job. Now, as I said a second ago, if the employer is going to file a motion to terminate TT, a copy of that written offer must accompany the employer's initial filing. But we're going to get into some more details on the actual written job offer itself. I want to bring to everyone's attention a very recent case. It was just decided May 14th of 2019 by the 10th District Court of Appeals in Franklin County, and that's who controls the Industrial Commission. And in that case, the issue was the job offer, and in this case it was a verbal job offer, sufficient to avoid the payment of temporary total compensation. And I won't go through each and every little fact of the case, but the salient facts are the employer made a verbal job offer and then followed up with a written job offer based on restrictions that were provided on a Medco 14. The court went through the law, and that controls payment of temporary total compensation benefits, and the law provides payment shall not be made for any period when an employee's treating physician has made a written statement that the employee is capable of returning to the employee's former position of employment, or, and this is the critical part, when work within the physical capabilities of the employer is made available by the employer or another employer. So that's the law, is the employer can make the job offer, and it doesn't say it has to be in writing. The Administrative Code expands on that a little bit, and it's 4121-3-32A6. And that defines the job offer, puts a little more meat on the bones, and it says that a job offer means a proposal made in good faith of suitable employment within a reasonable proximity of the injured worker's residence. If the injured worker refuses an oral job offer and the employer intends to initiate proceedings to terminate TT, the employer must give the injured worker a written job offer at least 48 hours prior to initiating the proceedings. So as you can see, the initial offer can be oral, but what I always tell people is that it's better to put things in writing for a whole host of reasons. And this case, the Mercy Health case, really expands upon that because it got to be really a spit match over what the verbal or oral job offer said. The employer said, we said A, B, and C. The claimant said, no, you didn't. You said D, E, F. And how do you prove it? There's no record of what was said in that verbal job offer. And the court in that case basically went on to hold that, yes, when you're trying to stop an initial payment period of TT from being paid, the job offer can be oral. But if there's no proof as to what that oral job offer was, then it's very difficult for the Industrial Commission or subsequent courts to address the issue because there's no proof. So although technically job offers initially can be oral, I think it's the best practice to always make the job offer in writing. I've thrown up now just sort of a sample letter, and I've had many clients ask me, just, give me a form letter. Well, keep in mind when it comes to a written job offer, there is no form letter. The exact sample I put on the screen, it sort of gives you a bare bones example of the type of information that's got to be in a job offer. You address it to the claimant, make sure you put the claim number, the date of injury on there. As you can see, I indicate, you can either, if it's coming from the lawyer or the employer or the third-party administrator, you just indicate who the letter's coming from, and you flat out say this offer is a written offer of light-duty work. And if the letter's going directly to the claimant, you can say to you, Joe Claimant or whoever. If it's to the attorney, if I represented, it's to say to your client. You want to return to work at the ABC plant, you tell them specifically when you want to show back up to work, Sunday night, July 21st, 2019. You attach the job restrictions or job descriptions they're going to return to and then enumerate them. The first job, this is just an example, a molding operator. Second job is scanning area molding operator. So, but you're going to have written, and it's absolutely critical to have very detailed descriptions of the job they're going to return to that include the actual job duties. And then you tell the claimant, put that letter, the claimant's going to be doing sit-down work in an office, involved laminating emergency responses, putting them in the production books. You enumerate the hours they're going to be working. You're going to be third shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Tell them what the rate of pay is going to be. And then another absolutely critical part of this letter is tell them the restrictions these jobs are based on. If you got a Medco 14 from the claimant's treating doctor, you attach a copy of the Medco 14 and you lay out right in the letter the exact job restrictions that are being honored. So if it is a Medco 14, you attach that. If it's a written disability slip from the doctor, and in a worst case scenario, if you're relying on an IME from your own IME doctor, attach a copy of that report, but enumerate in the letter the actual restrictions the IME doctor gives. It is not possible to put too much information in this letter. The courts have held it's got to be very detailed, it's got to be exact. So when the Industrial Commission's looking at this sometime later or a subsequent court's looking at it, you can show exactly what job was offered to the claimant, what that job actually involved, the physical actions the job required, and the restrictions that were being honored. So there's absolutely no question the job was going to be within their physical capabilities. Having taken thousands of these type of hearings, the claimant is always going to come in and argue, I couldn't do that job, or the job wasn't within my restrictions. So the employer is going to have had the burden to show that job involved doing A, B, and C, and those job activities were clearly within the restrictions the claimant's doctor or your IME doctor gave. So, like I said, there is no form letter. Every one of these written job offers has got to be specifically detailed to your specific claim and put a lot of information in there. Things for you to consider when making these job offers. A written job offer cannot be supplemented by non-written promises, and I've seen this happen time and time again. You'll make a written job offer, the claimant will show up on the floor, and either an HR person or a supervisor will say, well, you're not going to be doing this exactly, you're going to be doing this. That's a big no-no. You can't, everything has got to be in writing, and the written job offer has to be the exact job they return to. Nothing can be verbal or handwritten once they show up. Be careful of using definitions like repetitive or instance or occasional. By that I mean, don't put in your letter, you'll do repetitive lifting of 3 pounds or you'll do occasional lifting. Be specific. Say you're going to be lifting a 3-pound brake line 3 times an hour or 3 times a minute or whatever it's going to be. The courts and the commission really frown on just generic words like repetitive and occasional. Be specific. Tell them the exact weight they're going to be lifting, how many times a minute or an hour they're going to be doing that. Again, don't be vague, be specific. All the above are pitfalls that the Industrial Commission and the courts will hammer an employer on to say that job offer wasn't specific enough. If you're relying on restrictions from your IME doctor, for heaven's sakes, make sure your doctor has been given and considers all the allowed conditions, every single one. If there are 5 conditions allowed in a claim, don't tell him 3 of the more significant ones. Tell him all 5 and make sure his restrictions are based on all of the restrictions. If you've got a claim that's actually allowed for physical and psychiatric conditions, you're going to have to get restrictions on both. Every allowed condition must be addressed in your return to work letter. Just because you don't think the psychiatric part of the claim of that, they're not treating for it, make sure there's no restrictions. And if their doctor has given any type of restrictions for the psychiatric, it's got to be addressed. And like I said earlier, put in the letter if the restrictions you're basing the job on are from the IME doctor or the attending physician. And keep in mind, a written job offer cannot be rehabilitated by an employer's verbal assurance that we're going to honor your restrictions. What do I mean by that? Don't expect you get on the floor and the supervisor is going to tell the claimant, don't worry, we're going to take care of you. We're going to have you doing some different jobs, but they're all going to be within your restrictions. Whatever job he's doing has got to be the job you made a written offer to return to. Don't get him back in the plant or back on the job saying you're going to be doing job A, and then 10 minutes into the job, a supervisor switches him to job B. Because as sure as I'm sitting here, they're going to argue that job was not within my restrictions. As I said a little bit ago, this is all based upon the statute that's on your screen, 4123.56A. And the most important part of that statute is the part that states when the job is within the physical capabilities by the employer or another employer. Now, they don't have to actually return to you. That's the preferable way, because then you control it. But if there's no job in the plant they can return to, there may be another job they can return to. You know, a perfect example of that is many employers will have a claimant return to a job like a Salvation Army or a Lot Industries or Goodwill Industries or something like that. Basically, it's almost a volunteer type position where it's a very non-physically demanding type of job where they're maybe sorting things or counting things. But so they're not working in your plant, but they may be working at another location for technically a different employer, but they're on your payroll. So just make sure that the job they're doing is within their physical capabilities. As I said a second ago, the Ohio Administrative Code does expand on the definition of what a job offer is. And the definition is something good to keep in mind when you're writing your job offer. It's got to be made in good faith, suitable employment, reasonable proximity to claimant's residence. All of those things need to be addressed. And what I've seen before is you'll have an employer that says, okay, we're going to give you a job at one of our remote convenience stores 100 miles away. Well, they're going to argue, well, that's not a good faith job offer. It's not even a reasonable proximity of a claimant's residence. So just keep these in mind. The Industrial Commission is going to take a critical view at any job offer. So it's got to be in good faith, got to be within a reasonable proximity of the claimant's residence. It's very hard to define good faith. It's almost one of those definitions, you know it when you see it. That's why when you make a job offer, be real. You want to make sure no one can argue this isn't made in good faith. If it could be within your plant or close to the plant, that's the easiest way to do it. And as I said before, the employer has got to give the claimant a written job offer 48 hours prior to filing a motion. So the scenario there would be they're not on TT, you make a verbal job offer, they don't show up or they don't accept it, don't go run out and file some type of a motion right away. You've got to file the motion first or make the written job offer first. The normal situation this comes up in is when they're already on temporary total compensation. You're doing everything you can to get them back to work, to stop the TT spigot from running. If you do make the verbal job offer, which you can do, you cannot file the motion to terminate until 48 hours after you make a written job offer. So if you just make the written job offer in the first place, you're all set. But if you do it verbally to start with, just make sure that you do it in writing at least 2 days before you file your motion. The second thing we're going to get into a little bit is vocational rehabilitation. If someone's off work, they can't go back to work. Another way to stop temporary total compensation from running or to get them back to work is to get them involved in what they call voc rehab. And this is known as the process of restoring the vocational functioning of an Ohio worker with a workers' compensation claim. Now, this is voluntary on the claimant's part. You can't force them to do it. But this is a not very well understood area of the law. And most employers, if they're going to go this route, they will hire a company to do this for them. There's really a difference between self-insured employers and state-funded employers, and I'll get that into in a minute. But for voc rehab to apply to your claim, obviously you've got to have an allowed claim. That's the first, you've got to have an allowed claim. The next thing you have, the injured worker, and this is going to be physical capabilities due to the allowed conditions. The worker must have a significant impediment to employment or the maintenance of employment as a direct result of the allowed conditions. That's all a real fancy way of saying he's got to have restrictions, and he's got to have restrictions due to the allowed conditions in the claim. So just keep in mind the technical rules of significant impediment to employment. The practical definition of that is they've got to have restrictions. If they have no restrictions, then there's no point in voc rehab. And then this is the other thing to keep in mind. The claimant, in order to be eligible for vocational rehabilitation, he's got to have one of the following, and this is like about 6 or 7 different things. On the date of their vocational rehab referral, the claimant must be receiving temporary total, permanent total, non-working wage loss, or wages in lieu of temporary total. If he doesn't have any of those, he's got to have previously received a scheduled loss award. If none of those apply, he's got to have received a permanent partial disability award and have restrictions dated within the last 6 months. If none of those apply, there's got to have been an MMI finding and job restrictions. He can be receiving job retention services from the company. He could have sustained a catastrophic injury, or he was receiving living maintenance not more than 90 days prior to the referral, and he has job restrictions and lost his job through no fault of his own. As you can see, these are very broad and all-encompassing. It'd be the rare claimant that in a workers' compensation claim hasn't fallen into at least one of those situations. I mean, probably 70% of claimants receive TT. And if they don't have received TT, they're going to get permanent partial, or they're not going to have, they're going to have restrictions or an MMI. So just look through this list, and as long as they fall into one of those categories, they're eligible to get voc rehab. This sort of goes without saying, but I've seen this mistake made. The claimant cannot be working on the date the referral to voc rehab is made, because if they're already working, the Bureau's position is, why do they need voc rehab? They're working. So they can't be working when the referral to voc rehab is made. If the referral is made, then there's going to be an assessment. And the claimant's got to have an assessment to determine his eligibility and feasibility to go through vocational rehabilitation. What is feasibility? Well, feasibility means there is a reasonable probability the injured worker is going to benefit from these services and return to work as a result. And the feasibility is determined at the time of the referral and is assessed throughout the rehab process. Well, again, what does all that mean? Make it sort of a common sense approach. If you're going to send someone through voc rehab, and if you're a self-insured employer, you're going to pay the freight for the voc rehab, it's got to be feasible that this rehab is going to accomplish something. What are you trying to accomplish with the voc rehab? Are you trying to retrain him, give him new job skills, educate them? What are you doing? Is it feasible that as a result of the program he's going through, he's going to be able to either return to work for you or do some other type of job for the rest of their life? And that's what they're looking at here. Feasibility. Is it likely that all this is, you just don't want to put the claimant through all this for nothing. You don't want to pay all this for nothing. So is it feasible they're going to get the claimant back to work? Again, your ultimate goal is to return the claimant to his original job. That's the crescendo of voc rehab. If you can do whatever you need to do to get the claimant back to his original job, that's the top and primary goal. Sometimes that's just not possible. They're going to have physical restrictions that they can no longer do the job. Say, for example, that job involves lifting 30 to 50 pounds on an occasional basis, and they have permanent restrictions of no lifting above 5 or 10 pounds. Well, they're never going to go back to that job again. And there's many factories and different jobs where heavy lifting is going to be a part of the job. So you're going to know right off the bat if they can go back to that original job. If the job doesn't involve heavy lifting, if it's not a physically demanding job, probably ultimately they can get back to it. But you want to encourage a claimant to return to the original employer at either his same job or a modified or different job. So if you keep in mind the ultimate goal is to get them back to their original job, short of that, get them back to a different or modified job with the same employer. In other words, is there another job in your plant they can do? Okay, you have 5 different lines in your plant and they have different physical demands on each line. Well, is one of the lines much less physically demanding than another? So if you can get them back to work in a different job or a modified job, that's a goal too. You just got to be careful on the employers that have that are unionized or have collective bargaining agreements. Got to keep those in the back of your mind too, because you've got to honor collective bargaining agreements and make sure you're within your union guidelines. You can also assist a claimant in returning to a job in the same industry. Well, for example, if your plant is in the automotive industry but there's no job in your plant they can do, maybe there are other jobs in the auto type industry that they can do. For example, I've seen many employers where the jobs they have are very physically demanding, but there are other employers that are making very lightweight parts for cars, and maybe they're making 1-pound brake lines, or 6-ounce springs, or whatever the example might be. So if you can get them back to a different job but in the same industry, that's the ultimate goal too. The fallback is basically get the claimant to return to any job at all. And the problem you're going to run into is if you've had a claimant that's used to making $20, $25, $30 an hour working in a certain industry, they can never go back to that, but maybe they can go work in a convenience store, or they can work in a retail store as a sales clerk, or they could become a telephone salesperson, whatever. There are a lot of jobs in this economy that are not physically demanding. You can try to get people back to those jobs by using vocational rehabilitation to train them and to teach them how to do different jobs. And this can many times be much more difficult than you think it is. A lot of the people do not have computer skills. They don't have math skills. So part of the vocational training is going to be to give them these new skills. If a new job is doing some basic computer things, have the Voc Rehab program teach them how to use a computer. Some people don't even know how to use a mouse. Teach them how to do these things. You want to be able to get them back to any job in any industry. You just need them working. This may result in some working wage loss, but that's better than someone being permanently, totally disabled or not working the rest of their life. Because as a practical matter, in my experience, most employers want to treat their employees fairly. They want to treat them well. And if someone has an industrial injury, this is a no-fault system, and a person can no longer work in that plant, most employers want to take care of that individual. And as a practical matter, most people want to work. And there's a few exceptions. I have seen many times where people do anything they can to stay off of work. But that's not the norm. Most people are good, hardworking people, and their goal is to get back to a job. They want to feel useful. So even if the job is not the job they used to do, or it doesn't pay as much as they used to do, getting them back to do anything is a tremendous accomplishment, because it's going to do much for their well-being, their psyche, their mental well-being. And I think there's been many studies that show getting people back to work basically helps them heal better. If they're in a Voc Rehabilitation program, they're going to be entitled to living maintenance. Well, what's living maintenance? Basically, you can think of that almost as temporary total compensation while you're in Voc Rehab. If you're a self-insured employer, it's paid directly by the self-insured employer. If you're a state fund employer, it's paid from the surplus fund. But keep in mind that even though it's paid from the surplus fund, it may have an impact on your risk and your premium. So make sure you talk to your TPA to find out if the living maintenance paid will affect your premiums and how much. So you go into this with your eyes open. Payments of living maintenance are going to actually begin on the date the claimant begins to participate in the Voc Rehab plan. It does not start on the day of referral. I mean, it could be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It could be a significant period of time between when the referral to Voc Rehab is made and when they actually start Voc Rehab. So they're not entitled to living maintenance from the date you decide to start the program. It's the date they start to participate, not the date that they're referred in. And it's not the date the claimant signs the plan. A lot of claimants and even claimants' lawyers are under the misguided impression that it starts right away. That's not the case. Payments begin when the claimant starts participation. Again, as I said a second ago, although living maintenance paid from the surplus fund, living maintenance can affect the reserves put on a claim. So just make sure you check into that so you don't have any surprises and see your premiums go up for some reason. When is living maintenance terminated? Well, the easiest one is when he returns to work. If your Voc Rehab program is so successful that they get back to work at your plant, modified job in your plant, or for another employer. living maintenance stops at that point. If for some reason it's determined that voc rehab is not going to work for this claimant, or the claimant can't do it, or for whatever, I've seen many claimants just quit voc rehab for any number of reasons, from they don't think they can do it, they don't want to deal with it anymore, they want to stay home, but if the plan is closed, they're not entitled to living maintenance as soon as the plan is closed. So this is not the type of thing they get on, they stay on forever. It's when they return to work or when the plan's closed. And ultimately, the claimant is only entitled up to 6 months of living maintenance, unless the commission actually makes a determination that they would benefit from more. And frankly, I can't remember the last time I saw that happen. 6 months is a long time for someone to be on living maintenance, because these voc rehab programs generally are not that long. You know, you're talking 1 to 2 months. You're not talking 6 months. If someone needs a lot more training, maybe it goes a little longer. But keep in mind, these programs, when you start a voc rehab program, when I talk to the employers, I tell them, don't go into this thinking this is going to be months and months. This is a fairly quick process. You want to train these people, and the goal is to get them back to work. There's been many studies that the longer someone's off work, the much harder it is to get them back to work. So 6 months is the most they're going to get, but usually as a practical matter, it's much less than that. Are there offsets to living maintenance? Well, yes, there are. It's rare, but it does happen that if they're going through voc rehab and on living maintenance, if they're getting wages or any type of remuneration while they're in that voc rehab plan, those benefits, whether it's wages or some type of any type of remuneration, they have to be endorsed over to the bureau or the self-insured employer if you're paying it, or deducted from the claimant's living maintenance payments. Now, this is, like I said, it's a very rare situation. And the one time that comes to mind I saw that happen is when somebody had like a small family business that families basically giving them some money to keep them floating, and we found out about it. So it would be internally inconsistent with voc rehab if they're doing another job on the side, because that was one of the whole reason to terminate a plan, is if they're going back to work or if they're working. The whole goal is to get them back to work. So if they found another job, they shouldn't need voc rehab. So although this rule's out there, it's very rare. Keep in mind, a self-insured employer, the rule provides that you've got to provide vocational rehab services equal to or greater in quality and content than the services provided by the Bureau. Now, the Bureau's plans aren't bad, but 99 out of 100 self-insured employers, if you're in this, you're going to go out and hire a third-party vendor or company that specializes in voc rehab. So once you hire that company, they're going to have a case manager assigned to the claim. They're going to be the one meeting with the claimant, setting up the plan, setting up the referral, and taking care of the voc rehab with the claimant. And frankly, I have never seen a company hired by a self-insured employer do less than the Bureau does. So although this rule is out there, just keep in mind that someone could come in and say, and I've actually had this happen a couple of times, where you see a claimant's attorney will say, what the self-insured employer is doing isn't enough. And well, in whose mind? Because, like I said, 99% of the time, a self-insured employer is going to be doing more than the Bureau. And the rule basically says you just got to have equal to or greater in quality and content than the services provided by the Bureau. And I'm not saying the Bureau doesn't do a good job. They do. But generally, if a self-insured employer is paying for it, and they're paying an outside company to do this, that company is going to be doing as much and probably a lot more than the Bureau does. So, but just keep in mind, if you get an overzealous claimants rep, sometimes they'll come in and say you're not doing enough. And I've had this happen a couple of times, and it's sort of infuriating when you think that as an employer, you're bending over backwards for your people, you're trying to get them back to work, and you're spending this extra money, and you get somebody coming in and saying, you're not doing enough. And it's very frustrating. What's included in a voc rehab plan? Well, career counseling. You can help them put together something as simple as a resume and a cover letter. And many of you might out there be thinking, well, how do they need help doing that? You'd be amazed. There's a lot of people out there who've never put a resume together in their life, have no idea what a resume should look like. They've never written a cover letter. A lot of these people don't even have high school graduations. So these are some basic things, but these are critical. Because if you're trying to find a job, you've got to have a resume and a cover letter. They're going to be helping them with a job search. A lot of people, if you've been working in the same place for 10, 15 years, you've lost touch with the job market. They're going to need help. How do you go out and find a job? Training, computer training, writing skills, different things. But these are the type of things that a voc rehab is going to do to make someone more marketable. So resumes, cover letters, job search, training. Work hardening if necessary. And I've seen that happen before where it's almost like a functional capacity test. You're going to have the part of the voc rehab is going to get someone ready to do a new job in a specific industry. If they're going to be using muscles or doing things they're not used to doing, you don't want to send them into a new job for the first time where they're probably going to injure themselves or develop some type of a problem. Work hardening is a good way to do that. Job modifications. If you're going to get them into a job with a different employer or even with you as in a different job with the same employer, there may be modifications to the job you're going to have to do. And you're going to spend a little money, but you'll save a lot more in the long run. Job modifications can be something as simple as a platform that someone who's 5 feet tall is standing on to do a job that a 6 foot tall person normally does. I mean, so you think job modifications, it doesn't have to be a huge thing. Building a platform, modifying the job in some way, making the job such that they can sit and do the job instead of standing if their restrictions are such that they can't stand all day. So job modifications can be very simple. They can be complex, but you want to make it so that they can do the job and get them back to work. Medical services can be included in voc rehab. Again, it can be general reconditioning through physical therapy and occupational therapy. Like I said a second ago, a lot of these people might not have worked in 3, 4, 5, or 6 months. And if you've been sitting home watching the Wheel of Fortune for the last 6 months, your body is going to be deconditioned. If they're not used to getting up every day and going to work and using their muscles, they're going to have to get some reconditioning, and that can be in the form of physical therapy or occupational therapy. Pain and stress management is another possibility. Again, if you have somebody that's been off work for a period of time, going back to work can be stressful, especially if they're going to a different job they're not used to. When you think about the different things you've done, if you're doing something that you haven't done in a long time, you've never done, you're using different muscles, it's going to hurt. Your muscles are going to be sore. And a lot of people can be thinking, well, this is a new injury. It's just the normal aches and pains of getting your body used to doing a new job. So this is the type of things you can do in vocational rehabilitation. Nutritional counseling. This is going above and beyond, but, teaching people how to eat better and take care of themselves is going to make them a better worker. Psychological services. Like I said, if you've had somebody that's been sitting home for a long period of time, their whole sense of self-worth is probably bottomed out. And that can be a huge part of getting people back to work. They've got to feel good about themselves. Also keep in mind, and a lot of people don't know about this, but you could be on the hook for some relocation expenses. Under the administrative code, they could get up to $2,000 if job opportunities do not exist within a reasonable commute on a daily basis, or if the injured worker has secured a new job and has to relocate, and expenses might include temporary housing for up to 60 days and to find a new residence if the claimant has to sell his home. So this doesn't happen very often, and it's the rare claimant that's going to be willing to relocate to get a new job, but it does happen. So just be aware that you could be on the hook for up to $2,000 of different type of relocation expenses. this is pretty close to the end. I could sit here and tell you some more witty anecdotes, but if anyone don't see where anyone's had any questions up to now. But keep in mind, well, hold on, there might be a question.
You need to also keep ADA regs when going through this.
Someone has asked whether or not you need to keep ADA regulations when going through this. And the easy answer to that is probably. I mean, that's over and above workers' compensation, but workers' comp and the ADA do interlap and coexist in many ways. And the answer is probably yes, but I can find out for sure and let you know. Keep in mind, the primary point of this presentation was getting people back to work. Temporary total compensation is probably the most expensive part of any claim. And people will stay off work as long as you let them usually. That's why as an employer, both as a state fund or a self-insured employer, your goal is to get people back to work as soon as humanly possible. I have many employers, and this is a great policy to have, that will tell the doctors in their area, we return our claimants or our employees to work under any restrictions. You give us a restriction and we'll honor it, whether it has to be for a couple weeks in the cafeteria sorting gloves or whatever. So educating the medical providers in your geographical area is a huge part of this. I've had employers, and we recommend this all the time, bring in, if you've got claimants doctors in that area that are sort of the bane of your existence, invite them to the plant. Show them the jobs. Show them that you do have light-duty jobs. Because many times the way a claimant tells their doctor about their job is light years than what it's really like. Show the medical providers in your area that the plant is not as bad as they think it is. There are jobs there that people can do, and impress upon people that your goal is to get your employees back to work doing some type of paid remunerative work that keeps them in the workforce, keeps them feeling good about themselves, and gives them a reason to get up every day. So again, I see many successful programs where they get the doctors involved, especially if you have occupational clinics that your claimants go to a lot. Get those doctors in. Let them tour the plant. Surprisingly, a lot of doctors have never been in big plants before, or little plants, or even if you don't have a plant at all. You want to show them what your jobs actually involve. You know, and a claimant describes something as, you know, they're doing something 1,000 times a day. Well, that's not always be true. Most employers will have rotations where they're rotating people through up to 5, 6, 7 different jobs every 30 minutes. And although one job in that rotation may involve lifting a 10-pound part, the other 6 jobs in that rotation involve lifting no more than a pound. You want to make sure these doctors know that, because you can't count on the claimants being upfront and being specific with the doctors and telling them accurately what the jobs involve. So develop an open line of communications with the medical providers your people go to. If you have an occupational clinic, get those doctors in, let them see, and develop relationships. You want to be able to call their office and say, hey, I see in your office note that Joe Claimant says he has to lift 30 pounds. Well, that's not right. We don't have a job in the plant that lifts that much. Here's what he does. Can he come back to this job? And that type of communication can make the difference between a good program and a bad program. But staying on top of it, when someone's off work, there shouldn't be a day that goes by that isn't tickled up for you to somehow, what do I need to do to get this person back to work? Do we have valid restrictions on file? Can we get them back to a light-duty job? Employers, as a general rule, are doing a much better job of that, but I just had a claim I was working on this week. Believe it or not, the claimant has been off work 7 years. 7 years, and they're not on permanent total. So I don't know how somebody can slip through the crack for that long. They get in the system where a computer just starts spitting out checks, and everyone forgets about it. And people change positions, and no one even knows about it. So, you know, have ways and checks and balances that if you've got people that are off work, make sure someone sets their eyes on those things weekly, with the goal is to get these people back to work. So I've given you ways to make a written job offer, explain to you, but you can do it verbally, but the best practice is to make sure it's in writing, be as specific as you possibly can. I gave you a form letter to use as just a bare bones guide. If you ever have a question, feel free to give me a call. We can talk through it, but the more information you can put in that, the better, because your goal is to get these people back to work. And if you can't get them back to work, that's when you fall into vocational rehab. So it's sort of a two-edged sword you can use. So I hope this today has helped you a little bit. All right, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today, and good luck, and keep them people working.